Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is out in theaters now. It is going to be making hopefully a lot of money. This is supposedly the final Mission Impossible movie. At least Tom Cruise has stated that it's the final Mission Impossible movie. He said the word final is in the title for a reason. This is going to be my spoiler-filled review for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. So if you have not seen The Final Reckoning yet, I do have a spoiler-free review for you to check out, where I allude to some things that I'm going to talk about here. Not necessarily everything in the movie, but if you have seen the movie or if you don't care about spoilers, welcome to the Final Reckoning spoiler review. And now, before we actually get into a lot of the things I want to talk about, I do want to talk about that first hour because I think that that's a good intro point to get into everything as it leads us into everything. That first hour for me was a giant mess. I could pinpoint exactly where this movie should have began. This movie should have began with Ethan in handcuffs in front of Sloane and the rest of the government officials. That's where this movie should have began. We didn't need the other 20 minutes of padding. We didn't need all this exposition dumpish stuff we already know from the previous Mission Impossible movies. There is one thing involving Gabriel and Grace, and she gets captured by Gabriel. Ethan goes to save her. That's actually a really good scene. I like that scene a lot. I don't know, man. Gabriel as a villain just doesn't really do it for me, and I'll talk more about him later, but this is where we get into something related to the Sevastopol submarine sinking and something else that was in previous movies that they tie back into this one, so let's talk about that. So in this scene, this movie brings up the rabbit's foot. Gabriel explains that the rabbit's foot is the core module for the entity, and the core module is located on the Sevastopol submarine. Now I'm not necessarily sure if I like that. Not because I dislike Mission Impossible 3. I actually really like Mission Impossible 3 a lot. But part of the charm of Mission Impossible 3 for me is that you don't know what the rabbit's foot is. They never explain in that movie what the rabbit's foot is. That's what makes it so mysterious. That's what makes it like, oh god, this thing is like dangerous. What is this thing? Like the fact that you don't know about it, the stakes feel higher than ever. Now, it just kind of lessens that impact for me. So I wish that that wasn't connected back to the Sevastopol sinking and connected to the plot for the Final Reckoning. Obviously, like Mission Impossible fans have been clamoring for years for an explanation to the rabbit's foot, and they finally got it. But for me, it was better left mysterious. It was just one of those things where it was like, you never explained it, you don't have to. We know how dangerous this thing is, but now it is part of this core module for the entity. Now that's what Ethan Hunt has to go and get on the Sevastopol, because essentially Gabriel courses him into acquiring the core module so that he can take control of the entity's source code. It's just one of those things where I was just like, this is just an unnecessary harkening back to previous Mission Impossible movies. This is where I felt that the fan service was a little bit forced for me, because Mission Impossible, sure, they've always referenced previous events from the movies, but nothing as hard as this, and especially for a movie that came out in 2006 in Mission Impossible 3. Like, you're looking almost 20 years later that you're taking a plot point or a device or a MacGuffin from a previous MI movie, and now you're explaining exactly what it is. It's 20 years and 5 movies later. Like, we could have just left that in the past. I know that there's a few people out there who were probably like, I don't care about that at all because I don't like Mission Impossible 3. And I think that a lot of people nowadays, unfortunately, are just like, oh, Mission Impossible 3 is the bad one because J.J. Abrams directed it. No, J.J. Abrams still has a lot of talent. Sure, he's a very safe filmmaker, but that doesn't make him bad. You all are just saying that because you didn't like his last Star Wars movie. So now everybody just piles on J.J. Abrams. And now anything that's brought up in a franchise that had a movie previously directed by J.J. Abrams that is being addressed in a later movie in a franchise, everybody's like, oh, that sucks now. So that's not how I feel with it, because I can actually respect J.J. Abrams as a director. He's a very safe director for sure. He does a lot of his mystery box things, and I think The Rabbit's Foot falls into that mystery box. At the same time, I'm not going to hate on that plot because it's J.J. Abrams. I just don't like it because, as I've stated already twice, The rabbit's foot to me was better left just being this mysterious object. I don't really see how the rabbit's foot to me is like, this thing that has to be addressed for the Sevastopol entity source code thing. It's weird to me. And I'll just leave the rabbit's foot thing at that. If you're happy they explained it, I'm happy for you. If you're like me and you didn't want them to explain it, I think that left you disappointed. All right, Luther Stickle. Moment of silence. Rest in peace, man. I've been grappling back and forth as to whether or not Luther should have died at this point in the movie, or the middle of the movie, or towards the end of the movie. Regardless, there was somebody that was going to die from the IMF team. I wasn't 100% sure if it was going to be Ethan. I was like 50-50 on that because I was like, if they kill Ethan, that's the definitive end of the series to me. But if they don't kill Ethan, and if this movie makes bank at the box office, they're going to make more, even though it's called The Final Reckoning. Like, they'll make more. Tom Cruise will come back as Ethan Hunt. He'll have maybe a new team. Maybe his team retires, or maybe all of his team members die. So I was 50-50 on Ethan dying, and Ethan doesn't die. He lives through the entirety of this movie, and throughout the entirety of the series, probably goes on to live his long life, but he survives. Luther is the one that dies. But I figured if anybody was going to die other than Ethan, which I was 50-50 on anyway, it was going to be either Benji or Luther. And they kind of tease you that Benji's going to die because Benji gets shot at the end. And Paris, Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy, she has to do emergency surgery on Benji. So at that point, I was like, oh shit, Benji's not going to make it either. But Benji makes it. So I could eliminate that. I mean, at that point in the movie, yeah, Luther Stickle had already died. I like the idea of Luther sacrificing himself. Gabriel has planted this nuclear bomb in subterranean London. Luther has stayed behind to sacrifice himself to try and defuse the bomb. It detonates. He dies in the ensuing explosion. I've been back and forth on this for the past couple days since I've seen the movie because I really do think that they underutilize Ving Rhames sometimes in these movies. 4 especially. He only has a cameo in Ghost Protocol, and I heard that was because of a pay dispute. But my thing is that I don't know, I was so against Luther dying in the beginning because I love Ving Rhames. I want more Ving Rhames. I want more Luther Stickle. I just thought it would have been maybe more impactful if it was towards the end, like maybe if when they were in the South African mine, that's where Luther died. But then at the same time, you would be teasing 2 deaths at the same time between him and Benji, and you would still have to pick who lives, who dies. And Luther would probably die. Maybe the middle of the movie could have worked. I don't know. It just, there's not really a sense of urgency to me from Ethan after he dies. Like, yeah, Ethan's devastated that he dies, and he goes straight on his mission. And the IMF team is split up for most of the movie. So he sends his entire IMF team to the Bering Sea. But I wanted more Luther, and I didn't want him to die as early as he did. The sacrifice part's great. I think that makes the perfect sense for Luther Stickle to stay behind, sacrifice himself. I just wish it was later in the movie, I guess. I don't know. Like, I'm still grappling with it because now I think its placement is actually good in the movie, and that was something I was really grappling with walking out of this movie. And when it happened that early in the movie, I was kind of pissed off, honestly. I was like, man, this is within the first hour of the movie. I think it's probably around maybe the half hour, 40-minute mark. So I'm like, we got 2 full hours without Luther Stickle? That's insane, dude. I get it. Every character has their time. Every character in a franchise that is really popular, like Luther Stickle, has their time to die. It was Luther's time. And I have no problem with Luther dying. I just think, I don't know. I'm still grappling with the idea of its placement in the movie. Whether it should have stayed where it was, whether it should have come a little bit later, or whether it should have come towards the end. He does have this great monologue at the end. So that kind of capped it all off for me, where I think it made me more at peace for it, like a voiceover monologue. And I think that worked since he died so early in the movie, and maybe that wouldn't have been as impactful. Like, it did feel like the whole, like, Iron Man, Tony Stark, I love you 3000 speech at the end of Endgame. I I was like, okay, and enough's enough a little bit. But I guess the impact of not having Luther there for 2 hours was felt more with that monologue than it probably would have been if he died later in the movie. All right, so Ethan sends his team to St. Matthew's Island in the Bering Sea. There's the CIA outpost, and we get a returning character from the very first Mission Impossible movie. Dunlow. You remember Dunlow? Yeah, the guy that was in the same room as Ethan when Ethan was trying to steal the knock list from the CIA, and there was like, and the knife fell down. There's a lot of callbacks like this, and surprisingly, Dunlow is in this movie, and shockingly, it's not just like a brief like cameo. They actually made Dunlow a supporting character. And I was really surprised with that. And they actually utilized him really well. Like the fact that after the CIA break in by Ethan Hunt and his team in the first movie, he was disavowed from the CIA and he was exiled there to the Bering Sea to that cabin. Like, yeah, you kind of feel bad for the guy. And you're wondering the whole time, like, is he going to help the IMF? Like, is he going to help Grace, Benji, Paris? Who's the other guy? The other guy that was with Shea Wiggum's character, Briggs, I don't know his name. Theo, I think. Theo? Yeah, Theo. The whole time you're wondering if he's going to help them because Russian special forces units come to the cabin and it's like this intense scene. It's one of the best action scenes of the movie. It's a small action scene, but it's intercut with Tom Cruise on a different submarine than the Sevastopol fighting another guy, and then that's intercut with like a shootout in the cabin, and it's really fucking awesome. It's one of the best scenes in the entire movie. And I love how like when Paris throws a punch, Ethan throws like finishes, he's like using the same punch and he like finishes that punch at the same time as it cuts back to him. He's like kicking somebody just as like Theo or Benji is kicking somebody as it cuts back. That part was really well edited. That was one of my favorite parts of the entire movie. But essentially why the IMF is here is that Dunlow has memorized the coordinates of the Sevastopol sinking, the submarine, because he recognized like a sonar signature. And it's a really intense scene because the cabin's burning down as the shootout's happening, as Ethan's fighting that guy on the other submarine. Dunlow has to transmit the coordinates so that Ethan knows where to find the Sevastopol wreck in the Bering Sea. And he's trying to transmit them to the team. The team's trying to transmit it to the. It's a really, really great scene. That's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. I don't think it's the best scene in the entire movie. The best scene in the entire movie comes almost after this. Because we got to talk about the Sevastopol. But before we talk about that awesome, tension-filled, claustrophobic scene where Ethan infiltrates the Sevastopol submarine's wreck at the bottom of essentially the ocean floor. It's on this continental shelf where every time he moves in the submarine just keeps moving to the edge of that continental shelf as if it's going to fall over to more depths of the ocean. Intense stuff. But I do feel like there's conflicting information here regarding the Sevastopol. Okay, let's talk the Sevastopol sinking for a minute. Because what I actually had to look this up on like the Mission Impossible fandom wiki. Because my understanding was that the Sevastopol sinking happened in 1996. It was down there for 30 years, and then like somebody in their backyard randomly one day discovered the two keys that are put together, the crucified keys that they call them, from the Sevastopol like 30 years later, and alerted government officials to what this actually was and to the sinking of the Sevastopol. And that was my understanding. That's how they presented it. That's why I was like really confused with that, because that's the thing. It's like Dead Reckoning makes that look like it happened like yesterday or a week ago. I'm like, okay, so like this is fairly recent. Like in Dead Reckoning, this sinking of the Sevastopol submarine, this Russian submarine that has the entity, the source code, the core module now on it, like this is bad. Like this happened yesterday or fairly recently, and that kicks off the chain of events for Dead Reckoning. That's fine. That's the way I understood it. The way the movie presents it is that it actually happened at least in my eyes, the way I understood it, because it's not very clear to me, because they're throwing around so many years and all that. It's so much information thrown at you. That's the thing. Like, there's so much exposition in this movie, and I get it. Mission Impossible has always had exposition, but sometimes it's just too much, where it just gets lost in the echo for me, or like information just gets misinterpreted on my end. So that's probably my fault right there. But the way that I interpreted it was that no, the Sevastopol sinking happened in 1996. The reason in this entire Mission Impossible 8 film series is happening is because of that. Like, this is the thing that set off the chain of events that caused everything in every movie to happen. This is what caused the chain of events from the first one to now to happen. And I guess that's not the case, because, as I said, I just wanted to get some clarity on that. When you have to go online to get clarity on something, like, that's not really my fault. That's the fault of the movie. That's the detriment of the movie. That's the movie's fault for not explaining it clearly, or for just throwing so much information at you where it thinks it's trying to be clever and explain it to you clearly. And it's just so lost in the shuffle of all the other information that you just have to gobble and swallow up, because it's explaining everything from previous movies. It's explaining something that happened yesterday. It's explaining future things. It's explaining things in the present. It became a little bit too much for me. So when I have to go online to look it up, that's not good, because actually the Sevastopol submarine sunk in the Mission Impossible universe in 2012. But that still doesn't really make sense to me, because it's just how it's presented in Dead Reckoning. Like, I feel like it's just, this is what I was alluding to in my spoiler-free review, where I said it feels like it's just retconning the last movie that just came out 2 years ago. Like, I feel like that's a giant retcon. Like, why didn't they just make it like a week ago? Like, everything, like this movie takes place 2 months after the events of Dead Reckoning. Like, why didn't they just acknowledge that it's like, okay, this is a fairly recent submarine sinking? Like, like, the fact that I thought it sunk in 1996, the way that they were presenting the information to me is insane. It makes more sense that it's like, okay, it's actually like 2012 that it's sank, but still, that seems insane to me too. That's where I just kind of got a little bit lost. That's where this movie, I think, got a little bit too big for its britches. It doesn't really make any sense, because I'm like, I get it. Like when Ethan's traversing the submarine, I get it. Maybe they're like, the bodies are in like a frozen state, and that scene's very haunting. Like, it's a really great scene where he comes across a couple of Russian bodies that are still on the submarine, and then there's like that one, and then the music goes, and you get the face like in a petrified state. Like, they're in petrified, but I'm like, wouldn't they be decomposed at the bottom of the ocean by the time, like, this is 2025? That's sunk in 2012. Their bodies shouldn't be in that good of a condition. All of the information relating to the Sevastopol submarine in this movie, I was not a big fan of. Ethan traversing the submarine, trying to get that core module, intense as hell. Easily the best scene in the movie, because it reminded me of what Mission Impossible originally was. It reminded me that Mission Impossible was originally about getting in, getting out without being seen as quick as you could, or it's just about infiltrating places without a lot of fucking action, but ratcheting up the tension. And that is exactly what this sequence does, especially when he has to open different doors on the submarine, and the water's coming in, and the water coming in forces the submarine to move closer to the edge of that continental shelf. It's very claustrophobic. It's very frantic. There's even some horror vibes, as I was explaining, when he sees the Russian bodies in a petrified state. Easily the best scene in the movie. Nobody else in this scene other than Ethan. And it's about a 10-minute scene of him infiltrating the sunken submarine, trying to get the core module, locating the core module, and him getting the hell out of there. And it makes it even more intense. Like, I felt for Ethan's life in that scene, because the submarine kept inching closer to that continental shelf where it could fall over that shelf. And it eventually does as he escapes. And then he drowns. He's halfway to the surface, and this is kind of another contention point for me, where it's like, how did Grace get him out of the sea? I don't know. I get it. Suspension of disbelief. It's a movie. You have to. Movies aren't meant to be taken seriously, but when you have an action franchise that is so grounded in realism, like Mission Impossible, there's just some things that are immediately going to cross your mind like that. I mostly wasn't concerned with that. I was mostly just focusing on the fact, like, okay, what the hell is the background of the Sevastopol submarine now? But that's whole submarine scene fantastic. To me, the second half of this movie, where like, because even in that first hour, like you learn that Ethan has to get to the Sevastopol submarine. It's just that first hour is so messy because it's all exposition and it's subplots and callbacks to all the other films. It's like, yeah, that plot line of him having to infiltrate the Sevastopol submarine is introduced so early in the movie, and it takes quite a while to get there. I would say it takes about a good hour for him to actually start going towards the submarine. And that was my point of contention here too. What I did like about the scene with Ethan and Luther before Luther died is that Luther always has a backup plan, right? I love Luther, man, because he essentially created this virus, this malware that can actually stop the entity. But Gabriel has stolen it, so they have to physically upload the entity to like a physical drive, and that's why Ethan. That's a big reason why Ethan's trying to get the core module so that they can actually put this malware in it, and it's called the poison pill. And I actually like that each little object has its own little name. Like you have the entity, you had the rabbit's foot from the third one, you had the syndicate in Rogue Nation, then you had like the syndicate of syndicates, the apostles in Fallout, the entity, the core module, the poison pill. Poison pill, there's not really much to say, but it's a really smart idea because it's like, how are you going to trap AI? How are you going to stop AI? How are you going to stop Gabriel from controlling this AI entity? What if we contain it to a physical drive and we put like this malware virus on it? It's really bringing me back to those days of like when you get malware on your computer. That's what I just think of, like, because that's essentially what it is. I mean, you're essentially hacking the AI to physically contain it so that it can't upload itself to all of these neural networks that are going to launch a global nuclear meltdown, because essentially in the future that's what the that's what the entity does. And so Luther's like, no, 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 to prevent that, here's this is the poison pill. And that's a really interesting idea. And it's like, this is the reason they got to get to South Africa, because the entity needs like a secure digital bunker, and Ethan surmises that this bunker is in South Africa. So let's talk about South Africa. This is what I thought was going to be the end of the movie anyways. I like trying to pick apart like certain action scenes in the movie where it's like, oh, that's going to be at the beginning, and then it completely surprises you when it's in the middle of the movie. I like doing that for some reason. I have no clue why. But anyways, like South Africa. So like they're in this bunker. Gabriel's gone for most of the movie. Like he's in the beginning of the movie. He's gone for the next hour and a half, and then he comes back in this bunker. And I love, you know what? And I don't like Gabriel as a villain. I think he's a really bad villain. And I'll talk more about that during the biplane chase scene. But you know what? Like, I have to give credit where credit is due. When a villain name drops the title of the movie, you get a little extra bonus there. Welcome, Ethan. The Final Reckoning. I'm like, bravo, man. Bravo. That's like your most iconic moment in either of these movies. And so then, like, everybody's converging on this bunker, like, because Kittredge wants the entity. He wants the U.S. government to control it, but Ethan doesn't want the U.S. government to control it. Well, at the same time, Ethan has to stop Gabriel from using the entity. It's a really intense scene. And then there's another nuclear bomb that is like revealed in this scene. I'm like, this man Gabriel loves his damn nuclear bombs, and that's where Benji gets injured, because every party that is converging on the entity, it just sparks a giant shootout. What could have been a great action scene, and it started off so good, and I was so disappointed because like the shootout is great, and then Ethan gets in a car and there's a car chase, and I'm like, okay, this car chase is awesome. His car flips onto his side, he gets out of the car, and I'm just like, so that was really quick. Is that the end of the car chase? And he starts walking out of the bunker. I'm like, come on, why not just give us a little bit more? Like, the whole movie is really a tension filled movie. It's emotional, it's trying to ratchet up this somber tone. So, a lot of the movie doesn't have a lot of action, and that's totally fine. As I said before, I like when Mission Impossible is more of a mind game and it's tension filled. That's what this movie is. But for that moment, I wanted a really sweet car chase in the bunker because it showed brief glimpses of that in the trailer. I was like, that scene looks cool. I'm really looking forward to that. And it happens. I was like, this is really fun. And then immediately it ends. I'm like, that's it. Damn it. That leads to the biplane chase. But yeah, so essentially what has to happen in this scene though. So Benji gets shot, but the rest of the IMF team, like Benji, Paris, Grace, Theo, they have to. This is where they have to trap it. To put it on the physical drive, they have to hack the bunker systems to reboot the entity to put it on that physical drive. And this is where I thought that Benji was going to die. And Ethan has to insert the poison pill into the module at the same time that Grace hacks the systems and the light turns green. So once that happens, Ethan's good to put the poison pill in the module. Which brings us to the biplane chase, because this is Gabriel's last stand. This is Ethan Hunt's last stand against Gabriel. Gabriel's such a terrible villain, man. Like, I understand the argument that it's like these movies aren't necessarily about the villains. Like, Mission Impossible has had a villain problem for a long time. I think the best villains are easily Owen Davian in Mission Impossible 3 and John Lark, aka August Walker, Henry Cavill's character in Fallout. Easily the best Mission Impossible villains. I get that these movies are more about the mission than the villains themselves, and the villains just kind of function as kind of like a different part of the mission. That's fine, I guess, but like, you need to have some sort of presence. Gabriel has no presence, which makes me believe Isai Morales was completely miscast. The guy is not a good actor. He is horrible in this final biplane chase. And the biplane chase, everybody was hyping it up, and I was just kind of like, yeah, this is fine. They did the helicopter scene better in Fallout, though. The helicopter scene in Fallout is so much better. Like, yeah, cool. Tom Cruise is hanging off of a plane, hanging for his dear life. If the trailer didn't show me that, I'd probably be like gawking over this scene. It's very similar to how I felt with him driving the motorcycle off the cliff in Dead Reckoning and parachuting off the motorcycle. I was like, big whoop did he do? Like, if that wasn't shown in the trailer, I probably would have been gawking over that. And I think here's my big problem. I think with these last two movies, the final acts, these movies are really just built around, at least the Reckoning movies, the next big Tom Cruise stunt that he can do. So it just becomes the big Tom Cruise stunt show. And that's really the selling point for these movies. The selling point for these movies didn't become, oh, hey, it's a Mission Impossible movie. It's a really good action movie. Here's some really cool action scenes. Here's a really good story. Here's a really good plot. Like, that is my problem with these last two Mission Impossible movies. And that's why I felt like this sequence didn't have the energy, the emotion, the passion behind it. Because all it is really Tom Cruise hanging off the plane, trying to get to Gabriel, him getting on Gabriel's plane, like the plane's doing a bunch of 360s and 180s and aerial nosedives, avoids a couple of cliffs. That's really it. Gabriel's death scene is hilarious. I think it's acted as poorly as Marion Cotillard's death scene in The Dark Knight Rises when she was Talia al Ghul. It's that level bad. It's funny because Ethan gets on his plane and then Ethan punches him, and then all of a sudden Gabriel's just like frozen in fear. And the way he dies is awesome. He falls off the plane, like falls into the rudder. It's actually pretty graphic for PG-13. But yeah, the biplane scene just didn't do anything for me, man. It had no energy. It had no spark. It had no sense of urgency or emotion behind it. That's why I was saying it felt like how Sam Mendes directed the action scenes in Spectre. It was like Christopher McQuarrie didn't want to do this. So I think that about wraps it up. There's a couple of other things that really bothered me in this movie. For all of Dead Reckoning, Shea Wiggum's character, his name is Jasper Briggs. He's chasing Ethan, and like he has his partner Theo, who ends up joining the IMF in this, which I thought was actually kind of cool. Like he understood Ethan's point of view. Jasper doesn't really understand Ethan's point of view, and then they just had to throw in some random reveal with him that he is actually the son of Jim Phelps from the first one. I guess it gives Ethan a little bit of closure, and it gives Jasper or Jim Phelps Jr. a little bit of closure, but it's just this reveal that's just it's not needed. Like who cares? Who cares? It doesn't have any impact on the plot. It's like every other reveal, dude. It's like I don't know. It reminded me of back in the day when they cast big name actors in like Star Trek. And I mean, I talked about Spectre already, but yeah, Spectre. It was like you had Benedict Cumberbatch in Star Trek Into Darkness, Christoph Waltz in Spectre. We all thought that they were going to be iconic villains from those franchises. We all thought Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be playing Khan, Christoph Waltz playing Blofeld. And then everybody involved with the movies like, nope, like Benedict Cumberbatch is this whole new character, John Harrison. Christoph Waltz is this whole new character, Franz Oberhauser. And then it's like, no, they are actually the iconic villains we thought they were. It's just the name changes had no direct impact on the plot. That's what this reminded me of. I'm like, this doesn't have any impact on anything that happened here, other than a movie that came out 30 years ago. It's little things like that, man, that just bothered me. When they're doing the callbacks and the flashbacks in the first hour of the movie, which I thought was a giant mess, I did find it funny that they only showed like 1 or 2 clips of Mission Impossible 2, because I know everybody hates Mission Impossible 2. They're like, that's the bastard child of the franchise. Here's what you really want. And they show a bunch of scenes from all the other ones, and there's like one from Mission Impossible 2. It was hilarious, man. So yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up. That's really what my big spoiler review for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I still don't think it's like this great movie. A part of that is because I think Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning are more built around the big insane stunt that Tom Cruise does rather than crafting a cohesive story. There's so many plot threads that are just introduced and explained, and everything's over explained. I mean, they always are in Mission Impossible, but it's always to the point where you can follow it. There's way too much in this movie, way too many callbacks. I just didn't think that some of the action had as much passion or energy behind it. It made me feel a bit disappointed walking out. I was like, this is the best they got, huh? But I did like the somber tone. As I said in my spoiler-free review, I wasn't mad or disappointed that there was a lack of action. I mean, when you really think about it, you have the scene in the beginning where Gabriel kidnaps Grace and then Ethan takes out all the guys. And you have the scene where they got to go get Paris and she takes out all the guys and it's Ethan and them in disguise and all that with the masks. You had the cabin shootout, which I thought was a standout. I thought that was great. That was better than the biplane chase, to be honest with you. The car chase in the mine was disappointing. Biplane chase was disappointing. The entire 10-minute sequence on the Sevastopol submarine sinking, the wreck, standout. Easily the best scene in the movie. But yeah, I think this is definitely the final one. The way it ends, you know, I mean, all the IMF team members meet up. Grace gives Ethan the hard drive. He's like the protector of the entity now, which is a little bit weird. I've seen a lot of people kind of not really like that. And then they all just decide to go their separate ways. I'm like, okay, that's a nice little way to bookend this series. That's a nice little way of ending it. And then the credits come and the Mission Impossible theme rolls on. It would have been funny if like there was like a post-credit scene, because for a long time it was rumored that Glenn Powell was going to be taking over the series from Tom Cruise. I would have laughed if like Ethan Hunt this whole time was like Glenn Powell wearing an Ethan Hunt mask or something, or Tom Cruise mask, and he was like, oh, I was Glenn Powell this whole time. It would have been the stupidest thing ever, but I would have laughed my ass off. But yeah, that's Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning for you. What were some of your favorite parts of The Final Reckoning? Let me know in the comments below. I will leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.